Story 1. When you have evidence that they cheated but do not really care. No sadness, no hatred, just indifference. Story 2. I had been experiencing stomach problems. I visited a gastroenterologist who told me he suspected stomach cancer and wanted to perform an endoscopy the next morning. I was terrified. When my wife came home from work, I asked her to sit down. I told her what the doctor said and explained that I would need her to drive me because I would not be able to drive afterward. She said, "But I don't want to miss work." At that moment, I knew our marriage was over. I later found out she was cheating with a younger man, a father of 3, and it would have disrupted their schedule of working late. In the end, it turned out I did not have cancer. Story 3. Finding her in a mutual video call with her married work colleague was a subtle sign, I guess. Story 4. When he made me almost cry at my birthday brunch in front of my friends and smirked as if it were funny after humiliating me, it was the lowest point in my life toward the end of it. For context, I am a 19-year-old female who was in a relationship with a 19-year-old male for over a year. While I understand that he is autistic, as am I, and sometimes struggles to understand socially appropriate boundaries and people's feelings, the relationship became emotionally abusive and strained at times. This was also due to the contributing red flag behavior of his father, who began to micromanage and control my life and shame me for not always being able to visit. I was the one who ended the relationship, which I regret, as it was spontaneous after I suffered a panic attack in the mall during a date. After that, his father berated my parents over text messages. I cried all the way home in the car, and my parents were confused and deeply upset. Story 5. When you start feeling strong waves of discomfort while listening to them talk, it is not always anger or disgust. Sometimes, basic discomfort is the body's way of politely reminding you to recoil. Story 6. When you dread talking to someone or your heart drops when you see them, if you feel like they are trapping you, when you lose your sense of self. Story 7. I think any clear sign is distance. When your partner is avoidant, not engaged, and wants more space out of the blue, it is usually a sign. If you are in a long-term relationship and your partner has a problem with something or someone, they usually provide details about what is going on. Even if they are mad at you, they will usually be upset and start some sort of argument. When things get abnormally quiet, it is likely because they are the problem and there is nothing for you to do or fix. They could also be tired of a repeated issue that is unlikely to change. Story 8. When she started leaving the house every time I came home. Story 9. The sign my relationship was over was when we stopped communicating and spending time together. It just felt like we were going through the motions without any real connection. Story 10. When "I love you" wasn't echoed but replied with "me too," they stopped making me feel like I mattered. Story 11. I don't know if it was codependency or anxious attachment, but I feel like my last relationship was full of signs that maybe it wasn't working, and I just ignored them. At one point, we had a check-in and asked each other what we needed more of. I said I was looking for more emotional availability and support from her. She said she wasn't sure if she could provide that. She said she wanted more effort from me to keep the relationship nourished. I said I would give it my best. But without my added effort, she didn't feel motivated to provide additional emotional availability and support. And without her additional emotional availability and support, I didn't feel motivated to make more of an effort. It felt like a constant cold war between us. Story 12. Not caring when they are sad or having a bad day. To be fair, a lot has to happen for me to get there. Story 13. Whenever I told him I was unhappy and wanted to leave, he started naming all the things I had asked from him over our entire marriage. He said, "I want to be better for you. I want to go to therapy, get you flowers, celebrate holidays together, spend time with our families, play fewer video games, watch a movie you want to see, go on dates every other week." It made me realize that he had always been listening to me ask for these things but had actively chosen not to do them because he did not care about me. Story 14. Whenever we talked about the future, he was vague. Eventually, when he replied maybe to a relationship question for the millionth time, I fully realized this man did not love me but, for whatever reason, did not have the courage to end it. So I did. Story 15. Enjoying alone time sometimes is normal, but I found myself regularly getting excited when he went on trips or social outings without me. Story 16. When she changed her views on having children, I had always wanted a big family. Over the course of the relationship, she really changed her perspective. It was not something we argued about extensively, just a disagreement on what we wanted for our lives. The exact line I told her was, "I will always love you, but if we get married, one of us will always resent the other." When I said that, we both realized the relationship was over. It was an amicable breakup for the best. Story 17. Unchanged behavior. You can communicate until you are exhausted, but the relationship is over when you put in all the effort and they cannot even remember what upset you, even after you have told them multiple times. It basically means they do not care if you are unhappy as long as they are happy or content in the relationship. Story 18. Dreading spending any time together, and when you do, you are annoyed by their mere presence. Story 19. This sounds really horrible, but when he touched me and it made me feel sick, I ended the relationship soon after. Story 20. I haven't moved out of the house yet as I am working on some things, so I can buy my own house. When I moved into the spare room, I experienced the peace that comes with being able to close the door and not having to deal with his idea of relationship work. I don't have to compromise who I am, how I feel, my goals and ambitions, how I parent, who my friends are, or have my behavior scrutinized. No more being micromanaged. It has been so much easier and more peaceful. Plus, now I can snuggle in bed with my dog again. I can be a better parent to my son since I don't have to focus as much on the relationship. Hopefully, in a couple of months, I will be in a position to move. Also, no more false and unfounded accusations of cheating, which was really starting to wear me down. Story 21. As soon as they say, "You deserve better," just know they will stop at nothing to self-sabotage the relationship from that point forward. Story 22. Given the power of hindsight, she always had an excuse not to meet my family. Her excuses were valid and I loved her, so I of course believed her. But my mom twice, my dad twice, my cousin's wedding, and my dad's wedding. I did not see it because I loved and trusted her, but in hindsight, it is clear she did not see a future with me and only wanted what I provided. Story 23. I had an ex who was writing letters to her ex-boyfriend who was in jail for the murder of a child. Safe to say, when I found that out, I broke it off quickly. Story 24. When he no longer showed he loved me, actions speak louder than words. Story 25. When I felt happier being alone and doing things alone than when I was with him or doing things with him. Sleeping, breakfast, shopping, anything. Story 26. When she goes to the pub straight after work and does not come back home until 2 in the morning, finding out that she has been with 3 men in your local pub. Story 27. On our wedding night, he said he really did not love me and that we probably should not have gotten married. Story 28. I think when we went 3 days without communication, I was neither upset nor did I care. She was like dead to me and it did not bother me at all. Story 29. I knew my first marriage was over when I turned onto my street, saw her car in the driveway because she got home before me, and I sighed as I pulled up to the house. Story 30. My ex and I had been together for 9 years and lived together for about 8. If I ever asked him for help with things around the house, he would be incredibly resistant, especially when it came to walking the dog if I was dealing with pain or a dysfunction flare-up. I always get the flu the week before finals. I am talking fever, body aches, chills, coughing, and a lot of mucus. I was legitimately sick. He got home from work, and I was on the couch, in and out of consciousness throughout the day. The poor dog had not been out for a walk in 8 hours, and needed to go to the bathroom. I asked him if he could take her outside. His response was, "Maybe the fresh air would do you some good." We were having a cold front. It was 16 degrees Fahrenheit with high winds. I knew it was over then. Sure enough, we ended it a few months later. It was not that he did not care enough about me that killed any love I had for him. How could anyone resent their partner so much that they would let a sweet, innocent little dog who loved him remain uncomfortable just to teach a lesson? What was the lesson he wanted to teach me? That I could not depend on him when I was down? Message received. Story 31. We were 15 at the time, so this might be naive and not a problem anymore, but when they are sad and you get sadder, you get annoyed and nervous. Instead of caring about them, you feel even more upset. Also, when they are always sad and you feel like you cannot take it anymore. It is not anyone's fault to be depressed, absolutely not. But when they become a negative presence, always making you feel worse about everything, and you feel like you need to stop enjoying your life to try to fix theirs, both sides are not okay. When you or your partner feel bad, just listen to each other a bit, support each other a bit, and feel better together, not worse together. Story 32. Everything I did or said was met with automatic contempt. All the joy or goodness was completely removed and replaced with violent anger and criticism intended to hurt, not to change. That is when you realize there is no coming back and it is time to make other plans. Story 33. We were still living together but doing most things completely separate. We were basically roommates who happened to sleep in the same bed. That's when I considered it over, anyway. We lived together like that for around 9 months, mostly because neither of us could afford to break our apartment lease. I was working 2 jobs for much of that time, and by the end of most 15-hour workdays, I couldn't even stand the thought of going back to our apartment. Not gonna lie, that situation left me in a bad state for years. 0 out of 10. Would not recommend. Story 34. When she started calling me the name of the man she was cheating on me with. Story 35. She would talk to me, and I would feel frustrated, just waiting for her to stop. She brought up marriage, which caused me anxiety. Those were the main signs. Story 36. When you have not had sexual intercourse in over a year and you really do not care. Story 37. When our relationship consisted of nothing but talking about the problems in our relationship. Story 38. Complete utter indifference to their absence and the exhaustion, unwillingness to fight for the relationship because too much had happened. Story 39. When I came home, I caught them completely naked, and him with my girl. Story 40. When I started to have serious health anxiety and was convinced I was dying, my body began shutting down. I suspected it was all the stress from the relationship, so I recommended therapy. Her response was, "Why would I go to therapy? This is the best I've ever felt." The anxiety had been ongoing for months. I had seen the doctor to try to figure out what the problem was. I entered therapy for myself. I even quit a job I had held for nearly a decade because I thought maybe it was stress from the job, or I could get a job making more money and she would be more content. I was a nervous wreck, thinking I was dying, and that was the best she ever felt. It was the darkest period of my life. Story 41. I'm asking myself this question right now. I love my boyfriend, but I'm starting to not care if he is around or not. We have the same group of friends, so either way I know I'll see him out. But if he's working or out and I'm not, I love having the time to myself lately and dread him coming home. I think it's just a phase, but I'm feeling very neutral towards him. I don't know what to do. Story 42. When we were cuddling in bed, we spent most of the time doom scrolling without interaction. There was not much left to say. We still talked a lot, but always ended up in highly controversial topics, which led to heated debates. I still enjoyed being with her, doing things, but it felt like we could not excite each other anymore. It was like a game you have played so many times that you know everything about it. It gets stale. I still think we could have stayed together, but neither of us had the time, energy, or will to start new adventures and grow together. Story 43. When he became cold and shut down, I knew it was over but was in denial for a while. Story 44. No signs of commitment or progress for over a year. Story 45. I could not trust her anymore. I do not know what it was, but I knew something was off. I went through her messages, did not find anything, and just knew our relationship was over regardless. I told her what I did the same day. We continued to be together for another year, with no intimacy, joy, or lasting laughter. I tried to make it work, I really did, but she chose to leave me. I do not know what changed her so much. Our relationship used to be effortless, but she started to question what she wants, and nothing seemed to lighten her mood. I suspect it is depression or something else, as she clearly shows some signs of trauma. I tried to make her go to therapy as it helped me, in similar stages of life, We still live together. She is going to move by the end of the year, but now any effort on my side is too late. She clearly wants me out of her life, and I cannot be in the way of the only wish she has had for herself this past year, no matter how much I want to win her back. I am really confused about what is going on, but the point is, I knew this was going to happen a year ago when I realized I do not trust her anymore. Story 46. Woke up one morning, he was still sleeping. I asked myself if I wanted to wake up with him beside me for the next 20 years. I did not. I broke up with him 2 days later. Story 47. Trying to decide if I am having the signs now or not. I mostly feel exhausted and compassion fatigue after months of him being in a depressive episode and experiencing another traumatic experience. I am having a hard time eliciting sympathy at the moment because none of my relationship needs have been met. Connection seems very distant. Intimacy is a challenge, and I dread seeing him because it is unpredictable what his mood will be. We have just started couples therapy and he started with a new therapist, but I feel like I need a little bit of positivity in reserve to give me the energy to keep trying, and I have not gotten it. It is tough because when I hear a lot of other people say these things, it is not related to mental health concerns, and I do not think of him in a depressed state as really being himself. If he does get back to being himself, I think many things will be better. Story 48. When she called me while I was at Camp Lejeune Camp Geiger School of Infantry and told me she could not wait any longer. Story 49. We couldn't communicate, so we stopped listening to each other. I got exhausted and frustrated from being stagnant but expressed my grievances to her in the wrong tone. So I never got through. I felt angry, defeated, and hopeless, so I left in a huff. Story 50. Arguments and a lack of communication became too much. Story 51. Realizing that we were just roommates who slept in the same bed, constantly doing our own thing in the same house. No physical touching except the occasional hug when one of us got home. These were all signs that she would start crying when we had sex. I moved into the spare bedroom not long after, and we decided we were not happy together. It hurt like hell and still does, but it was the best decision for both of us. Story 52. The opposite of love is not hate. It is indifference. Once you are there, it is over. Story 53. I dreaded coming home to him every day because I knew I was about to feel more invisible and lonely than anywhere else. I realized it was not changing. Story 54. He asked the judge for a paternity test on our daughter while we were receiving court-mandated therapy and counseling. Many things happened before this that I kept forgiving, but this was absolutely the straw that broke the camel's back. Story 55. Constant fights without resolution and loss of trust in the partner. Story 56. I did everything for my wife because I wanted her to be happy. She never cared about my happiness. I kept lying to myself, telling myself that one day she would appreciate everything I do for her. One night, I was driving a 30-minute round trip to another state to buy her some soda water she liked, and I realized that she would never do anything like this for me. Story 57. There were acts on her that I did not consent to. That was a clear sign. Story 58. My ex-wife told me while I was changing a car battery, "I just imagined you dying, and it didn't bother me at all." Story 59. He no longer showed affection. He did not even look at me. The worst feeling is being so lonely in their presence. Story 60. When she said she was doing therapy for me because I asked but not for herself and that she was stopping, it was a very valid reason. Not being ready to do self-work is okay, but I knew the relationship would end within a few months if she did not work on certain things. We broke up for several reasons with a lot of love and respect. Story 61. When I went to Chile for a backpacking trip in Patagonia, I bought a painting of the mountain range I was about to visit. I thought, maybe this trip will give me the space and clarity to finally get out, and I can look at this painting from now on and thank those mountains. It worked. Those 4 days without cell service to talk to him were the most peaceful I had experienced in months, and I finally got out. Story 62. When you support others and they do not reciprocate, offering excuses or reframing your needs as burdensome without cause. Story 63. He moved a girl down from Alaska and told me she was his best friend's girlfriend. His best friend was married and messaged me that he had been cheating on me with that girl and they were moving in together. Story 64. When I realized that I was spending time with them because I felt obligated, not because I wanted to. Story 65. You are just waiting for your partner to make a big mistake and feel relieved that you can use it as an excuse to break up. Story 66. 72 hours after I almost died from sepsis and was still in my hospital bed. My ex brought the bills for me to pay because it was my job. Story 67. When you feel more alone with the person than when you are actually by yourself. I have a distinct memory I associate with the end of a relationship. We were driving to Key West and got in a fight. We were at a red light and I looked at the car next to us. I wished with all my being that I was in that car going somewhere with those random people. Story 68. My boyfriend and I always held hands on the way home from work. Then it happened that he did not hold my hand. And as funny as it sounds, that was when he became cold to me. There are basic habits in a relationship that you sometimes do not notice, and it is their sudden absence that starts to bother you. Story 69. When he wanted to be high all the time, we were literally writing starter checks to his dealer to get him a fix. I knew before then it was falling apart. He also brought a random person home one night, trying to convince me to participate in a threesome. It turned out the person was straight and homeless, and was only doing it to get a roof over his head and maybe food and water. Story 70. When my ex-husband told me he could not do this anymore, the feeling of happiness that filled me was quite intense. I had not truly recognized the mental distress I was experiencing until that moment. Story 71. Sudden change in behavior. Canceling dates last minute too often or avoiding meeting up frequently. Avoiding conversations. Blaming me for everything. Refusing to hold my hand when walking together. Still wanted sex though, and then admitted that I was replaced by someone younger and more attractive. Cheated after 3 years together. Done. Story 72. I was no longer excited to see him, and sex felt like a chore that was expected, rather than something we both enjoyed. Story 73. When he showed up to our son's 5th birthday party an hour late and under the influence, I left 2 weeks later after 9 years. Story 74. When my then-girlfriend got me 2 pairs of jeans for Christmas, her gifts had always been thoughtful and something I definitely wanted. So when I opened the box and saw 2 pairs of jeans, I knew it was over. A month later, I found out she was sleeping with my best friend. Story 75. For me, it was when my ex-wife started calling me by my given name instead of nicknames like honey or babe. We had been together for more than 20 years. And I could not remember when she last used my proper name. It was all downhill from there over a 7-year period. The good news is we finally got amicably divorced, and I am much happier now with my new fiancé. Story 76. When you feel indifferent, there is no more anger, hurt, sadness, frustration, or anything you experienced throughout the relationship. You simply do not care anymore, and you know that nothing they say or do will make you feel differently. Story 77. She used chat generative pre-trained transformer to text me and eventually to end our relationship. Story 78. When a breakup song was on the radio, and out of nowhere, I couldn't hold back my tears. This was the sign it was over and I should end it. Story 79. When I was home alone, the caller thought my significant other was home instead. I have never arranged a quicker move out of town in my life. Story 80. When she completely disregarded my feelings about another individual, she ended up cheating on me with that person, so my intuition was valid. Story 81. Rolling my eyes and getting irritated every time their name appeared on my phone. Story 82. When, despite not liking your job, you are still happier at work because you are not at home. Story 83. For me, it felt like she no longer valued or seemed to struggle with the strain of distance that was separating us both. I felt like she stopped caring about comforting me with love, so I decided that was the sign for me to end our relationship. No part of me wanted to, but it just seemed to be the only right option. Life is not easy, I guess. Story 84. Sitting in separate rooms, waiting to go to bed later than usual. Keeping the TV volume up while the other person tries to sleep. Story 85. Constantly feeling disappointed and wanting more. A 12-hour car ride and being intentionally ignored. Story 86. They stopped trying to be kind. They stopped sharing about life as much. They stopped being sincere in conversations. They stopped talking because there was little to discuss. They stopped chatting due to a lack of intellectual stimulation. Story 87. When I realized that if I didn't reach out first, I wouldn't hear from him for days. He no longer cared about what I had to say, did not make me a priority at all, and completely stopped putting in effort. In the end, I felt like I was breaking up with myself because he still couldn't find the courage to explain what he was thinking other than feeling sad and overwhelmed but not knowing why. Dating someone avoidant truly drains the life out of you. If I had not been holding on to a previous version of him that did care, I would have left the relationship much earlier with more of my dignity and self-respect intact. Story 88. Never-ending disputes that leave no room for discussion or cooperation. Story 89. When I realized this was not the same person I fell in love with. Story 90. When I caught her in our bed with another man's penis in her mouth. Story 91. One of my last relationships before I met my wife in college lasted over a year. In the second year, things seemed a bit off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. We still hung out a lot and told each other, "I love you." But things weren't as intense as the year before. One Saturday night, we had a date night. I picked her up, went out for a nice dinner, then watched a movie at my apartment. She fell asleep on my couch. When the movie was over, I waited a bit and then woke her up. She stretched, looked me squarely in the eye, and said, "Hey, we need to talk." I really couldn't believe it. We all know what "we need to talk" means. I cut her off because I was shocked. I asked why, after spending the whole evening together, going out to eat at a nice place, watching a movie. She didn't just tell me. She said, "I was waiting for the right time." I chuckled, and she didn't like it. I guess she thought I should be more upset than confused. She tried to start an argument, and I just told her to leave. It's been over 20 years. I think I saw her around campus a few times, said hi, and that was about it. I think about it every once in a while, mostly when I'm off on the timing of things. I wish we would run into each other one day. I would probably bring up the story and try to laugh about it together. For a short time, I think both of us thought the other was the one. Honestly, I think we both dodged bullets. I have a happy life, and from what I've heard from a few mutual friends, she does too. Story 92. When the partner stops craving your attention or presence, speaking in the long term. Story 93. When he showed me a picture of a beautiful girl who sent him a follow request, he raved about her beauty sincerely. Story 94. A common sign that a relationship might be over is when communication breaks down completely. If you find that you are no longer having meaningful conversations, or if discussions often lead to arguments, it can be a red flag. Another sign is if you start feeling indifferent about each other, when you no longer care about spending time together or making things work. Those feelings of disconnect often signal that it might be time to reevaluate the relationship. Story 95. When my ex-wife and I stopped arguing, there was at least a sense of care and passion. We would often talk about our issues, get past them, and things would feel fine. Eventually, we reached a point where we stopped arguing, and there was just awkward, uncomfortable silence. We would sit next to each other for an extended period without speaking. It was mutual apathy. This was far worse than when we were arguing, and I knew we were officially done. Story 96. You stop making plans for the future together because the relationship feels uncertain, or you no longer envision the other person being part of your long-term life. Story 97. I probably should have stopped when I started throwing up from the anxiety that the relationship was causing me. However, I told myself that it was something wrong with me and forced myself to keep going. Story 98. When we went on vacation together, I thought, I think I would have more fun by myself. Then I was invited to a wedding across the country and had a week-long vacation by myself. It was indeed much more fun alone. I ended it 2 weeks later. Story 99. It may seem trivial, but when he changed his Facebook relationship status from "in a relationship" to "no relationship information," while I was living with him and pregnant with his child. Story 100. I completely lost my sweet self. You could see another person in the mirror, careless, aggressive, dependent. Never again. Story 101. When your significant other buys life insurance in your name without your knowledge, forges your signature, and names themselves as the sole beneficiary. Story 102. She said she did not want to see me anymore and she took the dog. I missed that dog. Story 103. When he threatened to jump off a bridge, I did not care and I hung up. Story 104. The breakup was definitely a sign that things were not going well. Story 105. She started saying would instead of will about future plans, such as travel. To me, I thought, yes, we are breaking up. Story 106. When you find them on Grindr and they refuse to take a sexually transmitted disease test for both of your sakes. Or when you dread going into your house and stay in your car to avoid them. Story 107. When the relationship needs work but only one person puts in effort. Story 108. Slowly drifting apart, not looking forward to spending time together anymore. Story 109. He lied and I did not care at all. It was such a relief to know that his lies were irrelevant to my life. From then on, when he talked, I just assumed he was lying and went about my business until he moved out. It was very freeing. Story 110. When it no longer mattered what he did, I preferred to be alone. Story 111. When you stop caring about your problems and how to solve them. Story 112. When you feel no emotion, just indifference, no empathy, no compassion, nothing. Story 113. When every conversation turned into an argument, even over the smallest things. It was like we could not communicate without tension anymore. Story 114. It was not his constant weed habit, the fact that he used acid 3 times a week, or him blasting Howard Stern every night for hours in our small shared apartment. I put up with so much from him. When he raised a hand to me, I knew he was taking all that verbal abuse to the next level. I moved out the next day while he was at work. Story 115. No sexual attraction whatsoever. Masturbation was preferable to being with them. Story 116. When I received a phone call asking if I could go to the hospital, my husband had been loaded into an ambulance half an hour earlier with breathing difficulties. They advised waiting an hour before calling the hospital for an update. He did not last that long. Story 117. When the good morning texts start coming later than usual. Story 118. He started being distant, having problems keeping an erection when it was time to have sex. He was texting, chatting, and messaging other women and was consumed by his phone. I will be honest, I am going to miss him, but I know we will never make it together. Story 119. I had a medical emergency several hundred miles from home and did not call him or ask anyone to call him because I did not want him to come. His presence would not have given me comfort and I did not need him to do anything for me. Story 120. Should have known. We had not had sex in 2 years. She was lying on the couch cuddled up with my female best friend at the time. I put my hand on her leg and she shooed me away. I got up, went into the bedroom to take a nap and cool off. Because what was that? After the best friend left, we had a conversation for about 20 minutes and she told me she had not been in love with me for 2 years. We broke up. I went to my friend's house, got very drunk, and started planning what was to be the greatest single summer of my life. Should have known and done better. Lesson learned. Story 121. I found myself feeling better while at work than I did at home and not wanting to leave work at the end of the day. Story 122. He did not reply when we had serious conversations or arguments. Story 123. When I realized I could no longer trust him and that he had no respect for me, I found out I was pregnant. He was completely unsupportive about it. I also discovered he was using dating sites and being unfaithful during this time. Unfortunately, this was not the first time. Story 124. The moment he blamed me for not trusting him when he could not be honest with me or himself. Story 125. He got cold when I reduced the supply a bit, showing behavior of a covert narcissist. Story 126. If he is basically living in the living room, sleeping on the couch and playing video games all day, you have to beg for a hug. Story 127. When I realized my expectations of a good man were too high for him to reach. Story 128. When he told me he didn't think it was worthwhile to hire a babysitter overnight so we could go out together and then both sleep in, keep in mind we could certainly afford it. I didn't decide to leave him then. It was such a little thing that we didn't even really argue about it at the time. It really stuck with me, though. Looking back, it was a turning point. Story 129. Supporting her through a difficult job for 3 months, being a crutch for all her emotions and stress while doing everything I could to make her life as good and easy as possible both outside of and during work. Only to then have the roles reversed, finding myself in the same situation she was in, and for her to tell me, if you need that kind of support, you need to go to your mother because you are not going to get it from me. Looking back, the realization that she would never do for me the things I would do for her, not because she could not, but because she did not want to, was something I always knew but just hoped she would change. Story 130. When he would not extend the same courtesies to me that I extended to him. For example, he needed to use the restroom. I said, okay, fine, go in that store and I will wait. But when I asked, can I run in for one specific item which will take a few minutes? The answer was absolutely not. Story 131. There were many moments, but the breaking point was very clear. In therapy, which he opposed aggressively, I finally realized that he had been gaslighting me for a long time. I had not let go of the idea that we could work through things. Then one day, when it happened again, I suddenly recognized his tell. Even as he was yelling and insisting that I was crazy, he would get an eerie smirk that he tried to cover up by avoiding eye contact and playing with his chin. Normally, those encounters would end with me crying hysterically in frustration and him proving that I was unhinged. This time, I remained calm and told him I wanted to discuss this later when he was not upset. The calmer I was, the more erratic his behavior became, trying to rattle me into hysteria. I finally reached a point where I tried to leave the house, and he tackled me, taking my keys and medication. In that instant, I knew it was over. I sneaked out early in the morning. Story 132. They started treating me like a servant, never wanting to do anything with me, and did not make self-improvements for the sake of our relationship. Story 133. I was telling a friend about my relationship, and she said, it sounds like no matter what my partner does at this point, you still won't be happy. I realized she was right. We had grown too far apart, were on totally different pages, and it was past the point of fixing. Story 134. When I realized he was not interested in spending time with me. Story 135. When they are not the first person you call with good or bad news. Story 136. When you are asking strangers on Reddit, you know there is no hope left. Story 137. I like my women the same way I like my coffee, without other men involved. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.